welcome to Bending the Narrative here on the Aspect Network. I'm one of your hosts, Alex Batts, and joining me every week to discuss the latest and greatest in the world of Avatar: The Last Airbender is Kate Kronquist. Kate, how are you doing today?
I am doing great, Alex. Thank you. So, today we're going to start our journey to the Northern Water Tribe with the episode The Southern Air Temple. And part of our journey throughout rewatching the series as well will be tracking Team Avatar's own journey throughout the world. So, for our YouTube audience, you can see behind me that I have a map of the Avatar world, and it is giant, and I love it. We also have the map that we're going to pull up every week and track the progress of the team. You can see right over there.
Yeah. So this is cool. I love that we have the
Very cool
map
map.
stuff to kind of like look, and this map is also insane. It's so detailed. I'm so jealous that you have an actual physical
I love
version of
it.
the map.
This is
I
my
just have
actual most prized possession, and I
it's
think this I'll be
huge.
buried with this.
It's
Wrap
gotta
me
be
in
like
this when I die, and put this in my coffin. Thank
yeah,
you.
it's gorgeous. It's got so much detail. One of the cool things is that it shows you the locations that they are for each of the episodes, and it like, highlights it,
Mhm.
which is awesome. And like you
And
really get to
I'm going to do
go
something
along.
my producer is going to hate, but I need to show you the scale of how big this is.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah, because honestly, this is important because I did
This
not.
is
Yeah,
important.
it's huge. It's a giant map. YouTube audience, if you're not watching on YouTube, go check to at least see the scale on that because
I'm
it's
5'2". This
enormous.
thing's about 7 foot tall, 7 feet
Yeah,
tall, maybe,
it's wild. It's so cool, but
for our
has
listeners.
all of the detail. We really, of course, it'll be more intense and get more fun the further along we get into the show. Obviously, as we like go to more places. Right now, we're visiting our first destination aside from the starting
Hmm.
point, going to the Southern Air Temple, which is super fun.
Super
So
fun.
yeah, so, oh yeah, this it's such a fun time at the Southern
It's
Air Temple,
so fun.
as we all know. Like, come on, it's a blast there. We get to play some airball. Nothing bad happens. We
Nothing
don't
bad happens
we
here.
don't find out about any like genocides or anything like that. I don't know. Why would
No.
never.
No.
So as Kate said, we're continuing our rewatch of the series with the third episode, directed by Lauren McMullen and written by Michael Dante DiMartino. And if you're just joining us, we will be discussing the show in its totality. So again, be warned, spoilers. I want to start this week
Mhm.
with discussing kind of how this episode sets the tone for the series. Like,
Mhm.
we get, especially for book one, right?
Yeah.
We have the gang traveling to a location, doing whatever hijinks or whatever they're going to do at the location, while we also cut to seeing Zuko in his pursuit of the gang. That's basically the general
Mhm.
formula that the show goes through for this book.
And
And
gang spelled GAANG.
yes, because it's
The
Aang's
End
gang,
Gang.
right?
It's
Yeah,
Aang's
of
gang.
course. So good. That's such a great
I
shorthand
love
for
when
Team
people use
Avatar.
that. Yeah.
It's incredible. The first time I
Whoever
saw that,
invented
I
that,
was like,
credit to you.
yeah, because like I was super super late to the fandom, and I saw that was like what everyone said, and I was like, oh, that's so
You're like, you're a
smart,
genius.
actually. Yeah. Um. So yeah, this one it sets the tone. We get to see that, which is really cool. So it opens with one, which I didn't even notice this. Our stellar eagle-eyed producer Sean pointed out that
Yeah, for
the
real.
chapter title has a sunrise. It's not just the
Mhm.
white like text, which is interesting because that's the only time that this happens. Um, but we open with the gang getting ready to leave after resting a little bit, and we learn that Aang wants to see his home, but Katara is being reluctant to show him because she knows what's likely awaiting them whenever they get there.
Mhm.
And Aang is kind of dismissive about the fact that that could be a possibility, which I think, again, very great character stuff from them, and that Katara is trying to be caring and like look out for the person that she cares about
Mhm.
and save them from this pain. And Aang, being childlike, is like, nah, it'll be fine, or like can't even
Yeah, like
like,
there's no way this can happen.
yeah, like
He's in denial.
he's like, no, it'll be okay, it's fine. So that's super super important, super interesting.
Mhm.
We cut to Zuko and Iroh getting off their ship at a dock to be repaired because they got really messed up at the end of the last episode. I
Royally
love.
messed up. Oh,
Oh, that's good. I
sorry.
didn't even mean to do that. Um, but I love again the visual gags in this show of the fact that like you could see how like banished isn't the right word, but like how low Zuko is in the
On the
priority in the
totem
Fire
pole, kind
Nation.
of. Yeah.
Yeah, like when his ship pulls up, and even besides the fact that it's damaged, just like the scale of his ship compared to the rest of the
Yes,
ships in the
compared to the
dock,
rest.
like he's very. They gave him the worst, the old. Like I think his ship was one of the first ones they used when the war started 100 years ago, right?
Yeah,
Like
like I think it is that same one
yeah,
that we see Aang and Katara explore that they set off the
yeah.
trap. I wonder.
It's
I wonder if it is the same.
it's so funny. It's
I
just
have to look
like
into that.
he gets the worst equipment. They don't
He
care about
does.
him.
And it's like the
um,
leftover soldiers, and all the soldiers are like, ugh, I got to do this mission. I got to listen to a 16-year-old.
yeah, which is hilarious. So we get there, and then
Mhm.
we get the introduction of Commander Zhao, who was captain, but we immediately learn he just got promoted
Mhm.
to commander, and
Also played by
also,
Jason Isaacs.
yep, was gonna, yeah, so good. He's
So good.
incredible. Which also I'll go ahead and get to it because we didn't mention it in the earlier episodes. But Aang's voice actor is Zach Tyler, Eisenbaker, Katara is Mae
Hmm.
Whitman, and Sokka is Jack Desana Isaacs, and so that's really cool.
Hmm.
But and then of course Zuko is Dante Basco. Love that.
Love him.
It's so good. Yeah, I was listening to like a little bit of some interviews with him, and I'm like, he's Zuko. He's Zuko. It's so great.
It's so great. It's so great.
Um,
Fellow
so yeah, we get
Zutara shipper. So I see you.
yeah,
Shout out. Okay, I'll shut up
we'll
about
have
it.
we'll get there
We'll
eventually.
get there. We'll get there.
Yeah, so I love how strong the introduction is for Zhao and
Hmm.
like the kind of it's again showing the conflict, like the larger conflict with Zuko and the Fire Nation and how like at odds he is with them, but instead of making it a like large thing, they're able to give you that in a very specific character versus character like
Hmm.
conflict. And like that gives you the kind of feeling of how they are.
You get
So
like everything in these two sentences. You learn, and we learned something about Iroh as well. We learned that Iroh was a great hero of the Fire Nation, but is retired.
yeah.
Um, we learn, Zuko and Iroh, like we're told straight up that he's the Fire Lord's son and brother, respectively,
Mhm.
and also that Iroh likes ginseng tea, and Zuko
Yeah,
hates Zhao.
which is so good. He's like, "Do they have ginseng tea?" It's my favorite. Like, which will repeatedly come back in
It
the show.
repeatedly comes up.
But it's just such a great, like, again, just character building moments that we get. Um, Zhao inquires about this. Oh, this is also where we learn that Zuko has been at sea for 2 years and searching for the
Hmm.
Avatar, and he's like, "Oh, I'll
Hmm.
finally be able to like get my honor back and be able to come back to the Fire Nation once I find him." Um, and Zuko lies to Zhao that he has not made any headway in his progress to find the Avatar because he doesn't want anyone knowing that. And
Hmm.
then that is very quickly undermined by the fact that Zhao had his guards interrogate the ship's crew and confirm that they had let the Avatar escape, which
Hmm.
I think it's so funny that Zhao immediately is like established as like, well, I'm going to do whatever I want. And, like,
Yeah.
I'll figure it out whether you want to tell me or not. Which is
I
so
also love
funny.
that they phrase it like he let them escape.
Yeah.
Like they don't
Like,
allow mistakes. Like they're like, no,
mhm.
you don't make mistakes. It doesn't slip away. Like you, that means you let him go.
Yeah,
I
like
think
it's
that's a
not that
little important phrasing there.
yeah, it's a very much like it's putting the blame at Zuko's feet, not like, oh,
Hmm.
it's the Avatar and he was a formidable opponent. Like, nah, Zuko,
Yeah.
be better. Like, you
Yeah.
messed up.
Like that means you were
Um,
weak. And
yeah, which is their whole thing. It's like you can't show weakness.
yeah.
Which again, we get so much good Fire Nation stuff in this
Yeah.
episode.
Like we
But
learned so
the
much
whole
about the culture.
yeah, it really like Zhao
Mhm.
hammers home what the like stereotypical like good Fire Nation soldier commander like person of their society should be. Like he's like, we do this by force, we do it right, and like that's it. That like nothing else matters really, which is
Yeah.
really cool. Um, so we get back to the air temple. I love that Sokka's entire like arc in this episode is that he's just hungry. Like
He's just hungry.
he's
That's,
just so
but
hungry.
like the fact that it's not just a bit and it actually
It has
propels the
payoff.
story,
Yeah,
it has
yeah,
payoff.
and then it has payoff at
Like,
the end too.
ah!
Is so funny. Like it starts from the very bit, like the first thing at the beginning of the episode is him mentioning that he's hungry, and then Aang makes a joke about using his food for like kindling for the fire, which is so
Yes.
funny. And he's
That's so
like,
funny.
"Oh,
He's like,
that's why."
that's why the fire smells so good.
Yeah, which is great. Just such funny, and of course, like Aang wouldn't really know about like what that was for. Like he's a kid, He's never had to
Yeah.
like camp to survive really. Like,
He also doesn't eat
um,
meat, so.
yeah.
Mhm.
And so they get to the air temple and start like walking around, and it's naturally empty because there's not going to be anyone there.
Yeah.
And so we get to again another great like visual, just like comedic bit. It's not purely visual, but like them playing airball is so funny that like Sokka like
So cute.
volun volunteers to play airball with him, a game that you literally can't play if you're not an airbender.
If
And
you're
then
not
he's
an
like,
airbender,
and
yeah.
he's like, I'm crushing it. Like I'm doing so good, man. Which is
It
just
just shows
hilarious.
how confident he is.
Yeah. Um, which is cool. Sokka finds a Fire Nation helmet
Hmm.
and they're gonna show Aang, but then Katara very quickly like covers it up and is like, no, we will not do that. Which again is Katara trying to save him and like spare him
Yeah.
that pain, which is a great character moment, but also just hurts because you're like, you can't keep putting it off. Like,
And there's something too, I think we missed this in the very first episode that
mhm,
when they're penguin sledding and, then come upon the ship, while they're penguin sledding, Katara says, I haven't done this since I was a kid. And Aang says, you still are a kid. And I
mm,
think that's a big part of their relationship. And like it's even shown here that Katara brings Aang to be an adult and Aang reminds Katara to be a kid. And
yeah.
it's like that's very much a big thing that happens throughout this whole series.
It also
And
is
it's shown
kind
in
of
those little
a
tidbits.
it like feels like Katara is trying to because she feels like she wasn't able to be a kid, I guess, or has
Yeah.
lost like the ability to still be a kid because of what like the responsibilities she's had to take on, and so she's trying to like protect that a little bit for him for like a little bit longer,
Hmm.
like if she can,
Yeah, because
which
she
is so
didn't get to
sweet.
have it. So
Yeah,
yeah.
it's so wholesome. But you're like, oh, no, you
And
can't.
like if you guys say that Katara being motherly is a bad thing or anti-feminist, the door.
Oh, it's ridiculous. I
Leave.
don't like that. The
Leave.
complaint is so odd. Like it's such a At the same time, though, I know
Yeah.
that a lot of people will use the like her being a motherly figure to the group as like why her and Aang should not be a thing, and like I got issues with that too because I don't think that that's exactly like that doesn't track. But
Hmm.
anyways, um, so
Yeah. Moving on.
we get Aang showing them the statue of Monkey Atso. We learned that
Hmm.
he was his teacher, so we get the first parental figure for Aang.
Hmm.
I love the flashback showing how silly the air nomads are. Like he's
Yes.
baking cakes, and you're like, oh, that's pretty cool. But the reason that he's baking cakes is so they can just throw them at the other air monks, which is
Yes. Because
hilarious.
like everybody's idea of monks in their head, I think, is so serious and quiet
Hmm.
and focused. And
Yeah,
I love that they're like, no, like they're
they're just
just monks, but they also
yeah,
have fun. Like they're people
they're just
too.
goofing around. Like they're just having a
Yeah.
good time. Like they're like, no, life is good. You should have a good time. Like be responsible, and be wise. But like also, yeah, I'll throw a
Hmm.
cake at my friend. Like that was a great joke.
A great gag. A great gag. And I do like that the people that do get the cake thrown on them are all the different shapes and sizes of them. Like
Hmm.
that
Even in that like 10 seconds, you get the like diversity there, which is
the
cool.
diversity of the whole.
And
Yeah.
we see the lemur bats, like because they each
And the
have
lemur
lemur
bats.
bats there, which like we'll come back later. We'll get to
Oh,
that.
that's
Put a
what they
pin
are.
in
They're
that.
lemur bats, not lemur monkeys.
Yes,
But I
yeah,
guess
because
is
they
a
have
lemur a
the.
monkey?
I think a lemur is a type of monkey. I'm pretty sure they're
This
probably
is
like a.
chat. What's a lemur? What the
Yeah,
heck is a lemur?
I have no idea. They're probably close. I guess they both like run around trees. I don't know. I'm not a zoologist.
We're an expert in Avatar, not what lemurs are. I'm not a
Yeah, so
zoologist.
we get that. We see the air temple with all the sky bison, which was also super cool. And we
Hmm.
also get Aang kind of like in the past dealing with the responsibility of like the fact that he's the Avatar. And
Hmm.
Gyatso says something really interesting, which we'll dive into more later. But the fact that the only mistake they made was telling him that he was the Avatar before he was 16,
Hmm.
which I think is very interesting.
Yeah.
And I hadn't really like fully thought about until like this rewatch. But so we get that and that flashback, and they go to the air temple sanctuary and they find this door that they
Hmm.
need to
The
open.
obviously CG door, but we can ignore
Well,
that.
yeah,
We'll
well,
give
it's
them
because it has
credit.
to like
Credit.
it has to
It
do the
has to
movements
move.
and stuff, and like
Yeah.
yeah, you can't always tell like the parts in scenes that are going to move
That are
because they're
going to
not
move.
the painted parts that are going to be still. I love though that they use airbending as a key. I think that is so smart and
Yes.
like such a just cool in
Like how they
universe
have the
thing to
door
do.
that they need firebending for. They have this door
Hmm.
that you need airbending for. That's so
It just like
smart.
it fits. Yeah, it's very smart. So we go and have them like entering the Dark Sanctuary, and we cut back to Zuko and Zhao and all of that
Mhm.
stuff as Zhao is interrogating him, and he calls Zuko a teenager and is all belittling about it, which is
I put
hilarious.
teenager derogatory.
Yeah, that's absolutely how it feels. Zuko, has a little outburst, destroys his
Mhm.
table, and then walks out.
Shows
And
his fiery, hot-headed personality.
yeah, as he should,
Mhm.
which is cool. And we'll get
Mhm.
more on that. But we go back to the air temple. We're in the sanctuary, and we see a ton of statues in spiral order. This
Mhm.
scene is wild to me, thinking about watching it and not knowing the context, because
Yes.
obviously we know, like, on a rewatch and like a podcast where we're deep diving into all of it, like we obviously know what all of this is. We know these are the past lives of the
Mhm.
Avatar and all of that stuff, but like this is the first time we're really getting that to the audience
Information.
outside of the
Mhm.
like exposition intro, right? Outside of like the Avatar goes through the thing, and like it's really getting into the fact that like this is a incredibly long cycle. Like the statues go up endlessly,
It
like
goes,
up the
yeah, it goes
wall.
back years and years. It starts to fade, like it's so tall.
Yeah, like we don't see the
Mhm.
beginning of the Avatar cycle essentially. And so like
Mhm.
there's hundreds of them. And we learn that it like cycles through all of the nations, and when the Avatar dies, it's reincarnated into the next one,
Mhm.
and that they're all like the same person, which is like it's wild. It's so much stuff that you get that again is delivered like it's exposition that's telling the audience, but it's done in a way that feels like a discovery as opposed to like just telling it to you.
Telling it to
Because
us, yeah.
because like it is a discovery for the characters. Like they
Mhm.
find this chamber and like all of these things, and like it feels like a revelation for them as opposed to just like, hey audience, you need to know this. Like
Yeah, like, and I do think it's, again, like, this is one of those things where it's so smart to have your main character be one, like a kid who
mhm,
hasn't learned everything yet, and maybe somebody, like, the idea to have him be buried in a hole for 100 years means that he has no idea what the world is today. So that's
mhm.
such an easy way to be like, oh, so then he needs everything explained to him. Hence,
Yeah.
like, he is in the same shoes as our audience where he doesn't know what's going on,
Yeah.
which is
Which
such a
is
great way to justify that.
it's incredibly smart. It's
Mhm.
just again another example of like them making super super smart storytelling decisions where like
Yes.
it gives them the bandwidth to be able to do these things.
Hmm.
So we get that. We think a firebender is oh, he mentions that Avatar Roku,
Oh
that
yeah.
like he has a connection, but he doesn't know how he like knows him.
Hmm.
So he's the Avatar before Aang, and we'll obviously get more of Roku as the season goes on, which is
Yeah.
super cool. Um, we think that a firebender approaches, but it turns out to be a lemur bat that Sokka and Aang both chase. So that's a cool like little sequence because Sokka's
I
like,
do
I need
love that.
food. Like,
Can you
I'm gonna
food?
eat him.
And then I do like
um,
that Aang is like, but that's a friend.
yeah, which is so great.
Friends are
Um,
not food.
we go back to Zhao and all of that. We get a search party ready, releasing Zuko and Iroh. Um, we learn that Zhao has thousands of warships under his command, which is crazy.
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
again, just the difference in like Zuko's a prince. Like he is by
Hmm.
all rights like the next in line for the throne. He has his one terrible little dinged up ship
The
that's
little
super
dingy,
small.
yeah.
And like Zhao, who just got promoted to commander, has like thousands apparently.
And it just shows you
Um,
too, like how large the Fire
the
Nation is
Fire
and how
Nation is.
powerful and imposing they are. Like it just really
Yeah.
emphasizes that. And the
I,
same too with the design of everything. It's all, like you said, like it's pointy, it's sharp, it's grand, it's
it's
there's
like
like gold
oppressive.
and red. It's yeah,
Yeah.
it's impressive.
They
It's daunting. Yeah.
it's so good. It really like
It's so
hammers home
good.
all of the like emotional and visual aesthetics that you like need for them,
Mhm.
which is
But
cool.
this, yeah, and this scene
Zuko,
too is important. We learn this is where we first learn that Zuko is a banished prince,
mhm,
um, and that if he gets the Avatar, this is the first time we hear him say his father will welcome him home with honor, and he'll get
yes,
his throne back. And then and Iroh also says, "Remember what happened last time you dueled a master." This is the first time we hear Agni Kai.
mhm,
Iroh mentions last time you dueled a master, and then it cuts to Zuko's scar,
yeah,
implying that his
it
scar
does.
from
it doesn't even cut. It does the smart
the
camera pan
slide.
across his face, and he's like, "I'll never forget." And you're like, "Oh,
All
it's
of
so
it, all
good."
of the things that they show with the scar is so good.
Yeah.
Way later on, there's a scene where Zuko's talking to Iroh, and they use like both sides of his face and
Hmm.
to talk about different things. It's so good. It's so
It's
smart.
such good visual storytelling. So yeah, that like
Yes.
we learn again so much in such a little amount of time as far as like Zuko and like where he's at in relation with his family and like the burn on his face and how he got that and like being a banished prince and like all of it. Zhao is like your father doesn't even want you and it's like oh man
Mm-hmm.
like that oh that's heavy, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Um, so they have then or Zuko has challenged him to an Agni Kai, which we don't know what that is exactly yet. We just know
Yeah.
that it's bad. We know the last time that it happened, Zuko obviously got the scar on his face,
Mm-hmm.
so that's not good. Um, we go back to the air temple, and this is when the real sad thing happens in this
Mm-hmm.
episode because they're chasing Momo, who's not Momo yet, but they're
Mm-hmm.
chasing the lemur bat,
Yes.
and he gets led to unfortunately Monkey Yatso's corpse, and
Which
he
also like a smart way to get him into there, first of all,
yeah
chasing the lemur.
yeah so smart like oh, everything is it's so well done. It's Sokka's need for like hunger that leads to
Mm-hmm.
he's like I need food and it's just like a gag but then it leads you into this very like
Like the
arguably the
actual real
most
thing.
like real thing that happens in the show to
Yes.
this point like we so and then again we see Monkey Otso's corpse, but then we see like I don't even know how many Fire Nation
How many
bodies
Fire
like
Nation soldiers are
strewn
there?
around
Yeah.
him. He's like, I'm taking you all down with me, like
And it's
essentially,
like
which
painted all beautiful. I don't know what was used to paint that, but it
is
was
gorgeous.
drawn so gorgeous, like gorgeously, is that a word? So beautifully.
Yeah,
And also,
it's
this is the only
incredible,
skeleton we ever see. We never see a skeleton again in the show,
which is very powerful. Like
which is very powerful.
I hadn't really
And I
thought about it
wonder,
in those terms, but it's wild
yeah. And I wonder if they had to fight with Nickelodeon a bit to get that
to keep
shown.
that. Maybe
Yeah, to
I
keep
can
that.
see that
I'm
honestly,
wondering. Yeah,
but like it's such a pivotal one though to get in there.
it really
Um,
is.
So obviously Aang gets overcome with emotion as he like realizes what's happened and like finally
Hmm.
like puts it together. And that's when he triggers into the Avatar state again for the third time in his mini episodes, which is
Hmm.
another pretty wild thing. So that happens, and then suddenly every statue's eyes glow blue, and we seem to be different temples around the world also glow blue, which I'm
Hmm.
a little confused, and I thought about this while I was rewatching this episode. I guess it might be like the proximity of him
I
to the
was just about,
temple,
yeah,
but I don't understand why him going into the avatar state this time triggered
that
that, but it
time.
didn't the other time. I am gonna have to assume it's just the proximity to like the temple and that being how that works. Um, but regardless,
That's what
it
I
triggers the
think.
temple to like light up, and now temples around the world light up,
Or
and
I
the
wonder if
Fire
like the
Nation.
past, sorry, with that theory, the past two times he had to be the Avatar was to save his life, right? That was the
Hmm.
past. So I wonder if this time, because it was
Yeah,
triggered because of emotional reasons,
as
if
opposed
that's
to like a
different,
like physical, just like saving
physical.
himself.
And
Maybe,
see, that's
yeah.
where it goes again, where even like the little plot holes that we can kind of think of,
You
these
can
little
come up with
questions,
really like
you can come up with good justifications for it.
yeah. But so now essentially the world knows the Avatar is back because
Mhm.
the temples get lit up and the fire temple priest dudes are like, alert to the Fire Lord, the Avatar is back. Like the Avatar's returned.
Yeah.
Um,
So
so
now
the
we know
cat's
the Fire Lord knows.
yeah, the cat's
Cat's out of the
really
bag.
out of the bag if it wasn't already. Um, so we have Aang losing his control of the Avatar spirit as Katara tries to like calm him down. And so these last two like things cut back together. We get that, and then we get the Agni Kai happening, which
God,
ah, it's so
this
good.
scene changes everything, I think. This
Yeah.
is the scene that's really like, oh, this this show is really interesting. Like this show's not just good, it's amazing.
Yeah.
The
Because we
fact that
get
you're rooting for the villain in the third episode,
is impressive.
what?
Because you put him against someone that you're like, oh well, this guy really
Is
sucks.
worse. Yeah.
Yeah. So we get the Agni Kai, which is we learn a duel between firebenders where the only way to win is to burn the other firebender.
Mhm.
And so it's just such a well done fight. Like the choreography is amazing, the
Yes.
animation's amazing. There's great character beats throughout it. Like Zuko obviously like starts to get beaten and then comes back, fights back, and like
Mm-hmm.
wins, but wins with restraint too. He doesn't burn Zhao. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
next time though, I'll mess you up. It's like, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna leave you, and like walks away. And then we see Zhao being a coward and like
Mm-hmm.
trying to burn him after his back is turned, and then we get Iroh stepping in and like saving him,
And being
and
like, that's not honorable. And the
yeah,
big
he's like,
thing is honor in the Fire Nation.
yeah, the biggest thing is honor in the
Mm-hmm.
Fire Nation, which is, I just remembered a moment in the live action show that made me so angry that I'll talk about in our next section. It's not even related to this
Next, I just say
episode,
it, yeah.
but um, so yeah, we get Iroh saying that he's disgraceful and like even in exile, my nephew is more honorable than you.
Period.
So good. Izuku's
Period.
like, did you really mean that? And he's like, of course I did. Like, ginseng's my favorite tea. Doesn't he
Ginseng's
say it
my
like?
favorite tea. Yeah, he says it like that.
Yeah, he like rolls it off, but like obviously that's what he means.
Yeah. And it's really
Um,
sweet. It really shows that Iroh's in his corner. And I think Zuko realizes that too. Zuko's like, wait, maybe
yeah,
sometimes adults are right
hmm
and do know what's
which is
best
so
for
good.
me. Which all kids have that
Uh,
realization at some point. You
yeah,
know?
it's just full like we get so much about the Fire Nation culture there and like what they're supposed to
Hmm.
do, and we also get all the family stuff with Zuko and Iroh and Ozai. Even though
Yes.
we don't meet him, we get a lot of character development for him through the other characters and how they talk about him and things like that. And
Hmm.
then we come back to Aang. I guess I could just call him
Hmm.
Avatar.
I'm
Just like
sorry.
completely freaking out. He's in the Avatar
Hmm.
state, losing it, and Katara is the one that's able to bring him out of it and comfort him and literally bring him back down to earth and like console him.
Literally. Yeah.
And it's so good. And she's literally just like, it's fine. Like you have us now. It's okay.
Hmm.
And Aang just like letting it out and being like, I really am the last like of my people is
Yeah.
so sad and
So
heartbreaking. And
beautiful.
I
And I like
yeah.
that she brings him down by talking about loss. And that's a big
Hmm.
main point. She's like, we've all lost people. Like when I lost my mother, I felt the same way. And
Yeah.
I like that the main point that they bring home is like, you are not alone though. Like we
Yeah.
are here. We are your family now. And she says that we are your family now.
Yeah, which is great.
And I'm
It's
like,
again
ah.
like it just hammers home the main themes really
Mhm.
succinctly and in a very emotionally poignant way. Um,
Mhm.
and then we get, them getting Momo, and Momo brings food to
Yeah.
Sokka, which we get
So
payoff for
sweet.
it. Like, come on. It's
Payoff.
so good. It was set up as a
Nothing is
bit
just a gag.
for the entire episode, but then we get real payoff for it where Momo brings him food. And they name him Momo, and now we really have the full gang with them. Well, until we get to season 2, but and
This
then it gets
this reminds
expansive.
me of, and you know that meme about in English class as a kid, they're like, why are the curtains blue? And
The
it's like
blue,
maybe the
like
curtains
sometimes
were
they just
just
are.
blue. And
Yeah.
it's like, no, like everything has a reason.
Yeah, and it really
And
does
everything
here.
has payoff. It really does. And it's so
It's
good
so
when it
impressive.
does. And
Hmm
it's so fun to figure it out like a puzzle piece.
It all
And
fits
also
together so well.
it all does. I do want to talk again at the ending, that Kalimba plays again as they fly away into the
Beautiful,
clouds.
gorgeous.
That's one of my favorite
The
things.
image of them like flying away there is just it's so pretty. It's a beautiful
It's so
shot.
beautiful. It
And
reminds me of the
again,
shot in Up, like many years later. Up does
mm,
that, where we pan out and the house has
it's
landed
now
next to
it's now about time
the
to say that I've never seen
waterfall.
Up.
Ah.
I know that's one of my big animation like blind spots. I haven't. I'm sorry.
Listeners who haven't seen Up, go do yourself. You get a box of tissues
And go to yeah. I mean,
and go watch it.
I've
It's
heard, but um,
devastatingly good, bittersweet.
yeah. So that episode, that's the episode. It sets the tone for what the series is going to be and the general
Mhm.
like plot, not plot, but like pattern. There we go. That's the P word that I wanted. Pattern that will follow
Yeah.
for most of this book, which was awesome. It's a fantastic episode. We love to see it.
It's so fun. I almost said fantastic. I don't talk like that. It's fantastic. All right. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the episodes and how they compare to the live action version of the series, which I know Alex has a lot to say about that. So we
Yeah.
will be right back. Welcome back to Bending the Narrative. Each week, we dive into Netflix's Avatar: The Last Airbender live action series. And while you can find our overall thoughts on the season in our first episode, throughout book one, we will be discussing in further detail how each episode compares to this live action companion. So, Alex, let's start with you.
All right, well, the big comparison point for this one in the live action is that this episode does not exist in the live action version,
Yeah.
essentially.
The
Um,
most important episode,
yeah,
arguably.
because they
Not in there.
like we kind of
Nope.
talked about at length in our previous episode, they
Mm-hmm.
showed the genocide of the air
Mm-hmm.
nomads at the Southern Air Temple, as opposed to in this where they decided to not show it. And we just spent a while talking about why we think that it was much more powerful for them to not show in the animated one and instead let the audience fill in those gaps there and let them feel the
Mm-hmm.
weight of like Aang finding that out and discovering that on his own, as opposed to, well, the audience has already seen it, so like, that's the way
Yeah.
that
And
we'll
it's even more
tackle
important
that
because
there.
Aang is kind of supposed to be us in a way. Like we're supposed
Yeah.
to relate to Aang. We're supposed to be taken through this
Hmm.
story through Aang's eyes. Like we learn as Aang learns,
Yeah.
kind of. And so Aang doesn't see the genocide. So we don't see
Yeah.
the genocide, which makes sense. Like Aang is also left to the imagination of what could have possibly happened to his own people. And
Yeah.
like that's a real thing that happens in life. Like a lot of people have to, if you don't see it or don't know exactly how it happened,
It's not.
having it left
It's
up to
a
your imagination is almost worse.
Yeah, and it's almost worse, and also it makes it easier for him to dismiss before he sees the like results of it, right? Before he sees the
Mm-hmm.
real
The
evidence, because
proof.
like he didn't see it.
Yeah.
It's not real. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
not something that he like got to experience, obviously. We do like get them going to the Southern Air Temple at the end of the first episode in the live action show, but it's a much more quick them just like going around because we have to pick up Momo, who I know you don't like the way
Mm-hmm.
he looks in the live action. I love him. I think he's so cute still.
Freaky. But also, like,
So
I'm scared of monkeys, so I think that's why.
yeah, that's fair.
Ever since I
He's
saw Nope, no monkeys.
Oh, that's very fair. I'm understandable.
I'm scared.
Um, but so like they kind of just like really breeze through the Southern Air Temple portion of the live action show. They also don't really
Yeah.
focus on the Avatar lore stuff in it as much, which
Yeah.
is like a big portion of the reason they're like narratively the reason that they're at the Southern Air Temple is because we need that information for the audience as to like how the
Mm-hmm.
Avatar cycle works and like what's going on here.
Yeah.
And so we don't really get that as much in the live action show, which again is more of like they already in other places have decided to over explain the things to the audience as opposed to,
Mm-hmm.
again, like we were saying earlier, like feeling like it's a discovery with the characters as far as like how all of this stuff goes. um which like they just again lose so much in character growth, in like in natural narrative growth, in
Mm-hmm.
trusting the audience, in
That they'll
having
get what each character wants and needs and their relationship. And like
yeah.
that scene with Katara and Aang, how Katara brings Aang down. And that
Hmm.
I would argue like that's the second time she does that because when he's underwater, we hear Katara shouting like Aang, Aang,
Yeah,
and then he
and that's where you
wakens
see me
into the
like,
Avatar
yeah.
state. Um, so like shows that their relationship is so important and why it's important that it is Katara with Aang because
Hmm.
Katara helps him manage this power that is out
Yeah,
of
and it
control right
just
now. We
it
don't
like
see
for
that.
if for some it doesn't like the emotional weight of that moment does not really hit in the live action show. Like it
Mm-hmm.
they basically do it like beat for beat essentially the same
Yeah.
when they do actually have him freaking out in the Avatar state and wrecking everything and like Katara bringing him down. Like that does literally happen in the live action show, but
Mm-hmm.
it just doesn't feel the same at all really. And is
Like it's not worked for.
Yeah, and you also lose the impact of what you were just talking about with like the one skeleton that we see in the animated show is Monk
Mhm.
Gyatso, and like that feels significantly less impactful in the live action show because in the first 30 minutes of the episode we watched
We
like
saw them all
hundreds of people
die.
be burned to death. Like
Yeah.
like
Like it's
I s-
important because it's like, oh, that's kind of one of
it
the
it's
only
shocking.
deaths we see,
Like
is it?
yeah,
I'm just
like I don't think anyone else really dies
like Iroh's son a little bit, but that's
in
kind of just talked
Avatar.
about. We never see that
Yeah, I know Korra kills not Korra herself, but like the show does show
in
a
the
couple.
show. Oh, and
Oh,
Jet dies.
yes. Rip.
Forgot about that.
Big
R.I.P.
rip.
And well, I mean, and the big theme for the end is that they're like, and you're gonna have to kill people as the
Hmm.
Avatar. Like that is a big plot point that comes up, and he's
Yeah.
very
And
much
he's
like,
very,
no, I'm gonna do this my way. I'm not gonna kill people.
yeah.
And that, well, now
Um,
we're talking about the finale, but we'll
it's
get
fine.
there.
Yeah. But yeah, it takes the shock of that away in the live action because it's like, oh well, I saw a bunch of corpses and people already like having to deal
That
with
doesn't
this
hit as much. Yeah.
at the yeah. So like you lose the impact of, like you were saying, Aang is supposed to be our point of view character or the character
Hmm.
that we're with, and we lose his shock. And even if in the live action version he is dealing with that shock, it's less shocking for the audience because we've been exposed to all of the other like trauma and
Yeah.
like horrible things
Like
that we saw in the opening of the episode.
it reminds me of in like, well, I hate to use this comparison, but like Schindler's List, like the red, the use of
Hmm.
red in that one bit for what
Yeah,
was it, the girl's shoes or the girl's dress?
I'm pretty sure it's shoes. I think.
Shoes, I think. But
Yeah.
it makes it so much more impactful that that's the only color. It's the
Hmm.
only time you see that,
Yeah,
that
it
it
hits.
just, it hits. It makes it hit
It
so
makes it
much more.
special.
If you save your best little bits and you don't give it all away at the start, it's gonna
Mhm.
make it better. If you don't give everything all
Yeah,
away.
it's
Again, this show is a slut.
it just yeah, it's something. But I also this is not entirely related to this episode or like the comparisons in these episodes. I don't think there's a really like solid comparison point in the animated series for when this moment happens, but in the live action show, what reminded me about it a few minutes ago whenever we were talking
Yeah.
and how like honor is the biggest thing for the Fire Nation and all of that. Their hair and their top knots are like super important to the Fire Nation. Like it's like one of
Yes.
the bit like that is if you like cut their hair or do anything with that, like that's like the number
Like
one
I know
thing
that's
that
even like in real life, like that's a Native American thing. If you cut your hair, like
yeah,
that's
it's like a
shameful. That's
yeah. And they
mhm.
literally in I don't remember which episode it is, but it's when Iroh is being transported as like a prisoner
Mhm.
and stuff. One of the archers like shoots an arrow from like and they get his top knot. Like they take his
Mhm.
top knot off and then the show just like that's
Moves on from
that
that.
yeah, it doesn't do like it doesn't linger on it makes no like he doesn't comment on it, Zuko doesn't comment on it. There's no
You're
anything.
right.
There's no, yeah, it's like almost played as a like it's not a gag exactly because it's just meant to show like the accuracy of the archers that are hanging out in the trees, you know, and like
Yeah, but
that they're
also
a
like
threat. But
his
that's a
top not
very
being
big
removed
deal.
is a removal of his honor. And that is like a
Yeah.
Japanese tradition, I know. Like the removal of
Hmm.
your hair means you've been shamed. They talk about this if anybody's seen the show Blue Eyed Samurai. Highly
Hmm.
suggest if you like Avatar, you will like this show. But they address it in there. Somebody's top knots gets cut off and
Yeah.
he's dishonored. He's shamed.
It's just
He
and
lost.
they don't get into
And
it.
doesn't Iroh also cut off his top knot in the animated show with Zuko when they both cut it off and put it in the river? Or is it just
Sounds right,
Zuko?
but I'm not sure. Yeah, that does
Yeah.
happen.
Okay.
So again, it's like a very important thing in the animated series that
Mhm.
just the live action show doesn't seem to care
Like,
about or have any interest in.
yeah.
Which is
Like
like,
that was important. It's kind of like I would say for you, I don't know much about Batman, but I know in one movie they just had him shooting guns.
yeah, that does happen.
And like,
And that
isn't that important? Isn't he
yeah,
all
that's
about
a
not
pretty
using guns?
yeah. Yeah, that's it's just one of those things where it's like, okay, I mean, I get you could do that, sure. Go for it.
Yeah.
I guess,
It's
man.
one of those things.
Yeah, it's just lots of odd decisions that I'm not really it just feels like they really like they lost the plot a little bit,
Yeah, they
which
just
is not
wanted to use the cool parts and they just wanted to show the fun bits without and
which
this
is
isn't
ironic because they lose a lot of the fun in
they
there too. Like
do.
they try to make it super like serious and like
Serious.
gritty and stuff. Because like even in this episode in the animated series, the like it's a very serious episode. Like the airball bit is hilarious. The
Hmm.
like Sokka, you know, constantly searching for food is hilarious. Like it's
Hmm.
always got the comedy mixed in there with the very serious drama, the very
And the
real
bits even
drama.
with Iroh. And that's, I think that shows a lot. This series is all about balance and yin and yang. And now
Hmm.
is like, that's, I think narratively too, it does so much yin and yang between even comparing Zuko to the gang and their relationships and
Yeah.
the relationships with parents between Katara and their parents and Zuko and his parents. and between Zuko and Iroh's relationship versus like maybe Aang and Gyatso's relationship. And we see all of that with the way they all talk to each other, with the fights. There's so much, and between the comedy bits too.
Yeah, it's just like
it is light and dark.
They nail that contrast and that juxtaposition so well. So
chef's kiss.
Yeah, that's the comparison section for now, which is fun. But up next, it's time for our segment Whispers of the White Lotus. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Bending the Narrative. We're moving on to a segment we like to call Whispers of the White Lotus. In this segment, we look deeper at some of the hidden narratives we get in the series and discuss them further. This week, we want to discuss the detail about the avatars being typically told their destiny at 16 versus how Aang finds out at 12. Kate, why do you think this is an important bit for the narrative for us to discuss?
I think it's very interesting to show that, like, it's a good emphasis on that he is too young to be knowing all this. And they didn't want to put him in this position. But in times of war, these kind of things happen. It reminds me in real life a little bit about Queen Elizabeth and how she came in to rule very young. And it was out of necessity. I think World War I, World War II was starting. I'm not a historian, putting that out there. I just watched The Crown. That's it. But I know she came into power like very young, and she had to woman up very fast. She had to get educated very fast, and a lot of it was duty to her country. And that kind of reminds me of, I can't believe I'm comparing Aang and Queen Elizabeth, but never thought I would say that in my life. It's just so saying. But it does remind me of that. There is that, like he's too young to be in power. It's not supposed to happen. They are supposed to wait till he's 16, but his life got interrupted because this war interrupted everything. Yeah. He's given this massive amount of responsibility way too early on. And he's a kid. He's 12 years old. Yeah. It's also, the Queen Elizabeth comparison is good because it made me think about probably the more direct, I guess, line of thinking that I pull from. And the fact that, like, in, elden times, whenever you would have like kings and queens all over the place and like rulers, and like if their parents died young and they were next in line for the throne, if they were not of age, they were king or queen regent. Like, wow. And like they had whoever that was like actually, like the hand of the king or something was ruling. Like they had an adult who was the actual like ruler up until they came of age to then take responsibility of the thing, because they're like, hey, this is a kid still. Like, yeah, this is a baby. Like actually ruling the kingdom. They're 13. Like, yeah, maybe we should wait a little bit. Didn't that happen in? Okay, again, this is for the historians watching this. I'm pretty sure there was a ruler who was. Who did become like take it? Who really was like 13 and was like terrible, probably. Terrible. I mean, I'm sure that's happened like a lot of times in history. But I think, yeah. Again, I'm not a historian. I'm an Avatar: The Last Airbender fan. But I mean, it makes sense. It's also interesting though, because of the avatars that we've seen and that we know of, more of them than not, at least that we know of by name, more of them than not have learned that younger than 16, I think. Actually, it might be even, because I know there's Aang, Korra, and Kyoshi all find out whenever they're well below 16. Yeah. I'm not sure about Yang Chen. I still need to finish reading those books, but I haven't read them. I got to get on that too. Yeah. Yeah, I need to get to them. I've heard they're really good. I saw a tweet the other day that was talking about something that happened in them, and I'm like, oh, I'm so mad. I just got spoiled for that, but I need to read them. It's fine. It's been out for a while. But so I'll give the benefit of the doubt and say that probably Yang Chen didn't know until she was 16. That seems accurate. And Roku also. I think probably Roku too. It's like a more traditional. They went the more traditional route. Which is it's really Karuk interesting. Too? Karuk, I'm not sure about. I don't know if they either get into it actually whenever he finds out, but he also dies super young because he's just irresponsible. He does, yeah. Like he's just love him. He's the little playboy dude who just like he should not have been. But but then Korra finds out early, just because like she's immediately because she's just good at it. Yeah, like her powers. Like, she's like I could do this. Not for any. There's no war. There's no specific reason. Like she's just like, oh, I could do all this.
She's like 8 years old and can bend all of the elements
I
already.
can
I'm
bend
like,
all
all
the
right,
elements. You're like,
cool.
damn.
I guess
All
sure.
right.
Go off, Cora. So yeah, I think it's really interesting that most of the ones that we've seen, at least the ones that we've really like spent time with, have found out that they are the Avatar significantly younger. And it
Hmm.
also, I think, has impacted all of them in like it sent them in much different trajectories. Like
Hmm.
Aang really like Aang also is again very different. Like as you mentioned, he is in the middle of a war, like a
Hmm.
100-year war. Whenever he like
Hmm.
really has to deal with the fact that he's the Avatar. But
Yeah.
right before
Like when
that, like
he's
whenever he
young, though, it's just starting, but they're like, I think they mentioned at some point, they're like, the Fire Nation is getting more powerful.
mhm,
We have to tell him now. Like, we need to start training him now because this is,
because we need the Avatar,
yeah,
like
this is going to become a problem.
which makes sense. And it's also it's so interesting that he really like is struggling with that because yeah, I can't imagine being told at 12 years old that like
The
hey,
fate of
you're
the world
supposed to
depends on
help.
me.
Yeah, like you're supposed to help balance the entire world and make sure things are fine. I'd be like, okay, hey man, can I finish puberty first? Like,
Can I finish puberty
thanks.
first? I'm
Like,
dealing with pimples right now. I don't want
yeah, like,
this.
come on,
Like,
dude. I don't need all of this. You're telling me I gotta bend all the other elements too. I like just got through airbending, man. Like,
yeah.
um, yeah, it's super interesting. And he's just given so much responsibility so young and then is literally put on ice for 100 years and then has to come
Oh,
out and like and like
sorry.
have even more responsibility on top of it. Like not only is he the Avatar, but the world is severely damaged in his absence and like he
I could
feels
not
that.
imagine putting the fate of the world in a 12-year-old's hands these days.
Absolutely not.
Especially after hearing about all the 12-year-old Sephora kids.
Yeah, it's
Imagine the fate of the world in their hands.
like at least for the Avatar world, it's a very different, like a more like they're foragers mostly. Technology is not
Yeah.
really, going out of control or whatever. But like,
Hmm.
yeah, that's wild. I think it's interesting. So I guess the reason, because one of the things that we want to talk about with this was like why that would be a rule in the first place. I think we
Yeah.
pretty much answered that in the fact that like, well, because no 12-year-old or like under 16 is even still pretty young to be telling someone
Yeah.
that like you're not going to be ready for that level of responsibility. Like you can't grasp that in its entirety. Like there's a
Hmm.
reason it takes Aang like as long like the whole show to like get
Hmm.
to the point that he
Grasp
needs to
that.
be
Yeah.
like as the Avatar, and even Korra who like is way more she's in a way healthier environment and way more like assured of herself in being
Hmm.
the Avatar, and she still is not really ready for the actual like responsibilities of that
Yeah.
whenever like push comes to shove and like she needs to start like doing things as the Avatar. Like it still takes her that whole series to like really get
Mhm.
to the point where like she needs to be to like complete her Avatar journey for
Yeah.
like to
And
do
I
that.
mean, it would also be a boring story if our character was fully
Just
realized and amazing
ready.
at the beginning. And I think the
Yeah,
only way that works is there are some
shortchanging
and
them.
there's some animes that kind of play on that are funny. There's an anime called One Punch Man where he's
Yeah, where
just
he just
super
like
overpowered and he just defeats everyone
every
immediately, and
mhm.
it's used as a comedy bit and like it works in that
Yeah,
context, but you
but
can
you can't.
only you'd have to make the whole show about that.
Yeah, exactly. You can't have the typical like hero's journey growth arc thing that you do
Yes.
with that, right?
Hmm.
Which is interesting. And then yeah, like Kiyoshi is another example of who found out when she was super young. Like I think she's like 9 or 10 maybe when she finds out, which is fat and also an orphan. Um,
Oh
yeah,
dear.
it's wild and like
See,
that
yeah, I don't know
really.
about her, so I want to hear you talk about this.
Yeah, so like she is they're trying to test like who the next Avatar is, and they're going like island to island and like just testing children. Like they're because they know it's going to be an earthbender, and so like they're
Hmm.
going to different
Did
like
they do the
earth.
toys?
Yeah, they do the
The
toys.
things?
They like
Okay.
try to they're like they have the toys that like one of them is from a past Avatar's life, or like however many.
Hmm.
There's like three out of like 30 or 40 toys that are on the ground or whatever, that like
Hmm.
some of these were from past Avatars' lives, and like if you're the Avatar, you'll feel the connection and be able to pick them out.
Hmm.
And so like that's how Kyoshi finds out that she's the Avatar, or they find out Kyoshi's the Avatar.
Hmm.
And hers is interesting because it's a kind of like misdirection at first. Like they like don't think that she is, and so like she gets the defeat of like not feeling like she's the Avatar, and then like
Mm.
later on like comes back and like realizes that she is. But it's again a thing where she finds out like way younger, and also like this goes into what we were talking about last episode with the parental thing, where she didn't have like she was an orphan growing up, and so that very
Mhm.
much changed her worldview too, and so like she views the responsibility of that much differently, and also because the world's not really at like war with her, like it's not in the best place because Karuk was super irresponsible, and so like there's not a whole lot of balance in the world at that
Mhm.
time. Like there's a lot more, it's not so much that like there's one nation ruling over all of them like the Fire Nation does in Avatar proper, but it's more that just like throughout the nations there's a lot of like corruption going on at different levels that she then has to deal with, and like that's really
Mhm.
her thing that she has to do like as the Avatar. And so it's very interesting that she's like thrust into that younger as well. um but yeah, it's just a weird like I
It's very
it doesn't
interesting
make sense that
comparing.
yeah, and it makes a lot of sense that traditionally, like optimally, like we should be able to wait
Yeah.
until they're
We shouldn't
16 to tell
ruin
them.
these, like cut their childhoods too short.
Yeah, like they should have like it's healthier if the avatar is able to
Mhm.
have a normal childhood before like also having to do all this stuff.
Yeah.
Which makes Roku messing up kind of even more like, hey man, what were you doing? Like the
Yeah.
fact that like you were more traditional in the things and you still like weren't able to stop your friend. Like, come on,
It's like I wonder
man.
if any this would be interesting, like if any of the avatars were to grow up and kind of become a little corrupt.
Yeah.
If they weren't, I think that would be
That's kind of
I
like
don't
you
know if
kind of
does that
get
happen in any of the stories?
yeah,
Any
not
of the comments?
necessarily like not that I know of, and you don't really get it's not the Karuk was like corrupt. He was just
Mm-hmm.
like not fit essentially like to
Mm.
be like for that like he just wasn't treating the role with like the
Like being serious. He
respect.
wasn't serious.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like he just was like, oh well, this is cool. I can do anything. Like,
Yeah.
and so he was fun about it. You brought up a point the other day before we were talking about this that I
Hmm.
think is interesting. I'd like to expand on in the fact that if they do, like in the instances where they are able to wait the 16 years before telling someone that they're the avatar, the world doesn't have an avatar for 16 years, which
Hmm.
is wild.
Like
Like,
smart on the Fire Nation to attack during that time, but I think they
yeah.
started when Roku was super old, or
Hmm.
when he was. How did he die? That was a fight. Do we know?
I think now you got me blanking because I know we get it to it in the show.
Oh, from isn't he fighting the volcano?
Yeah.
I think that's how he died. But they started that at a very
Yeah.
smart time.
They were like, okay,
That
well,
worked
we
out
got
very
time
well.
because
Like
they're
that
not
is a good
supposed
time
to
to
like,
invade.
yeah, because they're like, well, we got 16 years optimally before they like, the next
Yeah.
avatar is like of age to do something against
And
us.
still it'd be a young avatar who's
Hmm.
inexperienced.
Yeah, but yeah, it's an interesting thing where like in an optimal world for them, there is going to be a 16-year window where the avatar is not doing stuff. Like
Not
that's such
there.
a weird
Like that's
thing
uneasy.
to have.
That causes unrest.
Yeah, like that's a very weird thing to have baked into your like world cycle.
Like imagine we can only have a president every 16 years.
16 years. Like we got to take a break for
We
a
gotta
little
take a
bit
break.
while the next one. Yeah, that's wild. Which I mean, I
We
guess
wait
is
for the
why the
next
Avatar
one.
is like not supposed to be a political leader either. Like
Yeah.
they're supposed to
Oh,
like
I
keep the
forgot that that is
political.
talked about. Yeah.
Yeah, like the whole thing is that they're supposed to keep the political leaders in check. Like that's like along
Hmm.
with the spirit world stuff, which is like, and they get more of it into it in Korra. I love Korra so much. I love that show. It's
Hell
we'll
yeah.
get there eventually. But like that's one of the
Yeah.
big things is that they're supposed to like be there to put a limit on that and a like
Yeah.
cap on that, which makes a lot of sense.
It does.
But
And our world really needs that right now.
okay, where's the Avatar when we needed
Where
him
is
most? He
we need an
vanished.
avatar? He vanished.
Come on,
The world needed him most. He didn't exist.
yeah.
It's so
Come on, man.
true.
Why are you a made up character? I don't
Why are you a
understand.
made up character? We need that so bad.
Yeah,
But is there any other comments you want to make on that and
I don't think so.
on these
I
points?
think
Yeah.
that was most of them. Yeah, so
I think
fascinating
that's
though.
it's just it's a very fascinating point to bring up, and too, like you brought up corruption, and actually I brought up corruption. But speaking of like, I think a lot of this is something that Avatar does that I actually didn't get to talk about. That they show a lot of leaders in charge that are corrupt, And
Mhm.
like it is, I think of one of the first shows I saw growing up, because I watched a show growing up when it was coming out. And I was like, oh, adults aren't always right.
Yeah,
Adults, the people in charge aren't always the right person for the job, and they're not always the smartest person in the room.
like they're making some dumb decisions or bad decisions.
Yeah. And like that comes later in the show too, and we'll explore that more. But I just think that'll be an interesting point to talk about. And
Yeah,
we kind of
absolutely.
get that a little bit here with Zhao is evil and he's in charge, and
Yeah,
we get some people in
and we
charge
can
who
tell
don't.
that
And Grand
he's a
Grand
bad
didn't
guy.
even know the right answers, and
Hmm.
she's the elder of the tribe.
Right.
So it's
Yeah,
it's very interesting.
it's
Yeah,
good.
that's about it. All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you everyone for tuning into this episode of Bending the Narrative. Next week, we're going to start out our grand adventures with the Warriors of Kyoshi. But before that, Alex, where can people find you online?
You can find me online at AP Batman with two T's, basically any social media.
Beautiful, beautiful. And you can find me online at Kate the Official on Instagram. And please be sure to subscribe here to The Aspect on YouTube and any platform where podcasts are found. Please leave us a like, leave a comment, turn on that bell for notifications, and you can also follow us on Twitter/X, Instagram, and TikTok at The Aspect Co. And thank you guys so much for listening. And Flamio, Hotman.